I think The Graveyard Book is a book for young readers in the same sense that The Jungle Book was a book for young readers, which is to say, Kipling wrote a bunch of stories and young readers loved them and adults loved them. And they loved them for different reasons and they got different things out of them. Kids would read the Jungle Book stories and dream about being Mowgli out there in the forest, free from school and schoolwork and being taught the language of animals. And adults would read something much stranger about wildness and childhood and the idea of childhood as a jungle. I think The Graveyard Book is definitely a children's book in that it has a very young protagonist who starts out aged about 18 months and grows to be about 16. And it's a children's book in that children seem to love it. And all of the response I've had from children has been incredibly enthusiastic. And they tell me how much they love it, and they tell me that it made them happy, and they tell me that they want to be like Bod. But what fascinates me most is the reaction I'm getting from adults, because I wasn't expecting adults to love it the way they do, and I certainly wasn't expecting adults to call me up and say, I cried. I got to the end of the book and I cried, which is what I keep hearing over and over again, because I think adults read The Graveyard Book as a book about family, and they see it as a metaphor for family, and I don't think they're wrong. It's funny, I now have, somebody asked me yesterday, I was at the Library of Congress signing books, and a line of several thousand people in the rain, and I was scribbling and scribbling, and somebody, one of the nice assistants in the Library of Congress, who didn't really know who I was but was moving books around, turned to me at one point and said, how many books have you published? There are so many different people coming in, and it seems like they all have a different book. They all have something else. How many books have you published? And I said, well, I don't know, lots, which is the truth. I guess the last thing I think about when I'm writing, or even when I'm publishing a book, is how it fits into the rest of the stuff on the shelf. I know that I would probably be a much more successful writer if only I'd write series of things and if I was easier to pigeonhole. But on the other hand, I think I'd probably have a lot less fun if I was writing series of things and if I was easy to pigeonhole. The Graveyard Book, it's got scary bits, but it's a very funny book. It's a very loving and warm and friendly book with an awful lot of dead people in it. And it has vicious murders and sweet headstones, and it has a long dead witch, and it has a hero who I think is the best hero I've ever written. I love him. His name's Bod, and I was talking earlier about sequels. The Graveyard Book is the only book that I've ever finished and gone, I would just love to carry this on. And Kipling wrote the second Jungle Book, so it's certainly not inconceivable that I could write the second Graveyard Book. I've been collaborating with Dave McKean now for about a quarter of a century. And the best thing about our collaboration is that I trust him utterly and he trusts me utterly, which means that on something like The Graveyard Book, I wrote the words and gave them to him, and he drew the pictures, and I love what he did. I love the imagination and the design elements that he brought to it. I love the fact that he's decided that some pages get printed white on black, which is really strange and wonderful and beautiful. I don't know, it's a matter of trust with Dave. He's the best artist I've ever known, personally. I think he's a genius. I think I'm incredibly lucky to get him. And I love everything he's done in The Graveyard Book, from the typography and the type to that magical picture on the front of a gravestone with something that you realize the second time you look at it is a boy's face carved out of it. And it somehow says everything about the Graveyard Book and about what it means to have a hero named Nobody.